I'm Anna Urban, and this is the Wildly Different podcast. I'm going to talk about all the wildly different takes out there on ADHD, neurodivergence, spirituality, manifestation, the meaning of life, trauma, shame, joy, purpose, and of course, all the actionable, practical strategies from the super scientific to the super esoteric. Some episodes will leave you with more questions than answers, but that's exactly the point. Is ADHD a disorder or a gift? Are we here to hack our time or maybe even to reimagine what productivity looks like entirely? How do we get ourselves to do the things we say we're going to do, even when every cell in our body would rather do something else? Are we neurodivergent, or are we aliens from Atlantis sent here to evolve humanity? Are supplements a scam? What's the deal with ADHD meds, and why do we have so much drama about it? If any of these questions resonate with you, then you've come to the right place. Let's get untamed. Welcome back, everyone. This is the Wildly Different podcast. I'm Anna Urban, and today we're going to talk about trauma. It's everywhere, on social media, on Reddit, in all kinds of mindset and personal development books, in conversations with friends. Everyone's talking about trauma. It's like we, as a society, have collectively woken up to the impact of our past wounds, and I think that is incredible. We're breaking generational patterns. We are parenting our kids better than we've ever done before. We are naming the things that programmed and conditioned us and giving ourselves permission to heal. That is huge. But here's the thing. While this shift is absolutely worthy and necessary, it can also become a trap, the trauma trap. Trauma can turn into the lens that we view everything through. It can become a major distraction from living in the present, from taking responsibility for our lives now. And that's what I'm going to explain to you on this episode. In another episode, I'll explain the origins of ADHD and why it's not as important as you may think it is. I'll explain how trauma can impact ADHD executive functions. But today is not that day. This episode might feel a little uncomfortable for you, and that's okay. I've been there. I've gone down the trauma, inner child rabbit hole, blaming, ruminating, wishing that I could rewrite my past, and that's why I feel called to share my story and some of the hard truths that I've learned along the way, because it didn't always serve me. It got to a point where it was the law of diminishing returns. Like I wasn't getting out of it as much as I was putting into it. So this is not, hear me, this is not about dismissing trauma or invalidating your pain. It's about asking an important question. At what point does processing our past become a barrier to living in the present? So if you're ready for some real talk about trauma, the good, the bad, and the ways that it might be holding us back, let's dive in. Honestly, I'm probably locking myself into a bunch of 1-star reviews for this brand new podcast, but I promise you honesty and authenticity and staying wild. So here it is, come what may. I want to hold the duality here. Yes, it's important to process trauma, but let's be honest, a lot of us have guzzled a little too much of the trauma Kool-Aid. It's keeping us stuck in victimhood, blaming mommy and daddy, blaming society, blaming Miss Krakowishevitz, your 3rd grade teacher, for being mean to you. If this is triggering you right now, take a moment to hold some space before reacting. If you've undergone major trauma, you don't need me, a stranger on the internet, to validate that for you. But if you're holding onto your trauma as the reason for why you're not moving forward or why you're still struggling, then it might be time for a healthy dose of reality. You're an adult now. You're not 10 years old anymore. Wishing you could go back and rewrite every mistake from your childhood is fantasy. It's la la land. It's not going to help you move forward in the here and now. Let me be real with you. I am not proud to admit this, but I think it's important that I share this because it shaped my perspective. I went down the inner child trauma rabbit hole, and what it left me with was a lot of resentment and a lot of money spent on therapy and programs and education that honestly I could have just spent on coaching. And this is not a knock on therapy. I'm not saying that coaching is better than therapy, but in my case, therapy was valuable, transformative even, but it also trapped me in this endless loop of talking about my problems without actually doing anything to change them. I did the EMDR, I did the CBT, I did the IFS, I did all of the things, right? And here's a little bit of my backstory. My parents were immigrants. My dad is from Portugal, my mom is from Brazil, and they were just trying to survive. They were just trying to survive in a country that was not their country of origin. My dad did literal back-breaking labor as a construction worker before starting his own business eventually. And Portuguese people aren't exactly the warm and fuzzy type, okay? My mom, being so far away from home, kept me on a pretty short leash, and I didn't have a lot of room to make my own decisions as a kid. I was really lacking self-trust, and as an adult, I had people-pleasing issues. There was all sorts of stuff. For a while, I blamed them. But one day, a friend of mine gently called me out on my obsession with trauma, and it planted a seed. At first, I was defensive, but then I got curious. I was able to look at it objectively, and I started to do some research. And it turns out there is some data behind this. And I'm not the only one who had this same experience. There are so many people out there who have taken the whole trauma thing out of context. Even the king of trauma, Gabor Mate himself, has said there is a limit to how much trauma work you can do. And eventually, you do have to get to a place of ownership and responsibility. What I realized was I was trying to blame my parents to absolve myself for my lack of accountability. And that is a hard pill to swallow. It was a harsh wake-up call, but I needed it. I fucking love my parents. If I'm going to blame them for all the ways that they messed me up, then I damn well better give them credit for everything that they did right. I got my scrappiness and my entrepreneurial mindset from my dad. My dad is fucking badass. He grew up dirt poor. He has a 5th grade education. He literally stopped going to school when he was 10 years old so that he could start working and help his family. At 16, he moved to the island of Açores off the coast of Portugal. And at 19, he came to the US by himself, hustled his ass off, and is the poster boy for the American dream. He is a boss. He is all of 5'3", by the way. Like, he is a tiny man and a force to be reckoned with. The way that I fiercely protect my kids, I got straight from my mom. When we get stuck in this wounded inner child spiral, we overlook how our childhood might have been exactly what we needed to become who we are. You have to give credit where credit is due. And again, let me be clear. If your parents locked you in a cupboard under the stairs and threw out your Hogwarts letters, this does not apply to you, obviously. But if this is resonating with you, if it stings a little, maybe it's time to revisit the inner child work. Maybe it's time to say, okay, I've learned enough about my inner child. I love her. I keep a picture of her at my desk, but I'm ready to live in the present as my inner adult. I'm ready to build her up now. I'm ready to meet the needs for myself that I didn't get met as a child. Because we don't have a time machine to go back in time. And again, duality, duality, duality. This conversation is not about right or wrong. It's not about black or white. If you really want to get clear on the ways in which you're sabotaging yourself, you have to start with ownership. And that means owning what is actually in your power to control. If going to therapy and learning emotional regulation tools is helping you, then keep doing that. But if you've been going to therapy for a while and nothing's really changed, maybe it's time to find a different therapist. Maybe it's time to start exploring ways in which you may be re-traumatizing yourself by acting on old belief systems. Now is the time to meet your needs for yourself. That really needed to be said. Like every episode, I want to leave you with a reflection question, something that you can noodle on, that you can write about in your journal. And today's question is, what part of your story are you holding on to so tightly that it's keeping you from writing the next chapter? Is it a narrative like, I'm bad with money because my parents taught me scarcity mindset? Or something like, it's so hard for me to declutter because my mom was a hoarder? What is an area of your life that you are perpetuating old wounds, but not actually taking any intentional action towards rewiring them? If you want more blunt truths like this, then you need to get on the waitlist for my transformative group coaching program, ADHD Untamed. It is unlike any other program out there because it combines the practical work of navigating ADHD with the deep spiritual work of owning your shadows, manifestation, building self-trust, and getting curious. It's your pathway to radical ownership. It doesn't take months and months and months to learn these tools. What it takes is someone to shake you awake and for you to feel empowered enough to take action. You'll get that, plus community, plus instant access to all of my courses, plus access to all of your questions answered about ADHD and mindset and ego and shadow and all of the things. All of that is waiting for you inside of ADHD Untamed. That's all for this week. I'll catch you next time. Stay wild.